You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 108, Thursday, presented by discussmetal.com. And if you talk about Thursday on Monday because, ooh, I need your love 8 days a week, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is Geoff. Can we talk about Ganglia instead, please?
No, we're talking about Thursday.
Okay, just this once.
Talking about Thursday on Monday. Wrap your mind around that. It's really hard, too, because everybody's like, I'm like, yeah, this week for Discography Discussion, we're doing Thursday. And people are like, who cares what day you're recording? And I'm like, no, we're doing Thursday.
We could do the Sundays. I'd be down with that.
There you go. I have to cover every band. There's got to be a band named after every day of the week.
What we should be doing is talking about Addams Family on Movie Mosh. That way we could reference Wednesday.
We could do that.
God.
I wasn't ready for that one. So, guys, Thursday, not really a metal band. We're doing that whole not always talk about metal band thing.
The next one needs to be the Sundays. Wild Horses is an awesome song. It's
well, we can't just abandon the metal tag 2 weeks in a row. That would be crazy.
Okay.
Especially after what you guys are about to say, and how, I'm going to need new friends after this episode.
I hate this band. I can't stand it. Dan says we're going to talk about Thursday. I cringed. I sat down. I listened to it. I'm here to record the show. Can I go home now, please?
You're already at home, Joe.
You're at home, dude.
I have no way out. It's not fair.
We all are. We're actually all at home.
This time it's my fault.
Yeah, it usually is Jeff's fault. But what's not Jeff's fault is my picking Thursday. I picked Thursday to talk about this week because they are one of my favorite bands. And they're kind of a nostalgia band for me. I really mainly enjoy their first 3 albums more than probably the rest of it.
Yeah, see, I'm just the opposite.
Oh, shocker.
The further we get into the discography, the more I like them. And I think it's mainly because Geoff becomes more of a singer instead of sounding like somebody who had his nose broke with a 2x4 while trying to sing at the same time.
Well, before we start talking about broken noses.
It's a good thing that we're not in the same studio for this episode, I have a feeling.
What the audience doesn't know is I sent everybody home because we were all about to get in a fist fight.
But it's mostly Jeff's fault.
Yes. And that would be Geoff Rickley.
Oh, man. Yeah, he's another Geoff.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know who I love more, Geoff Rickley or Jeff Kane. It's probably Jeff Kane.
Better be.
Yeah, well.
I actually visit you.
I will say that Jeff Rickley makes me feel
dreams.
better than Jeff Kane. Makes me super happy. Anyway, yeah, Thursdays were definitely one of my favorite bands. They kind of introduced me to the whole, I don't want to say screamo because this is not screamo, but to a lot of people they might consider it that. It's the melodic emo music with some screaming thrown into it. We'll put it that way. And the first album I actually heard by them was called Full Collapse. I think that was the one that most people who knew anything about this kind of music, that would probably be the first Thursday album they heard, although they did have a debut before that as well.
Well, before Dan forces me to write a segue into this ad read, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We're on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. And the reason we love them so much is because, well, they help us get recommended to other listeners of other podcasts. You see, the whole world is run by robots or algorithmic robots. All they're trying to do is recommend cool stuff for us. So in order to get recommended, we have to have reviews. And we appreciate everybody who has reviewed us so far. And we will actually read the reviews on the show, no matter what, as we've done in the past. So send those reviews, and people can hear your beautiful words coming out of my not-so-beautiful voice. We got an email from Jeremy Prince, as we often do. He says for the Crucified episode, hey, fun episode. Loved Doug. Loved that magazine so much. Fun to hear some history. Also, you guys talked about the Crucified and Pantera. I couldn't tell you exactly what podcast I heard it on. I'm guessing Urban Achiever. But Mark tells a story about opening up for Pantera and how nice Phil was to him. Also, how Phil told the sound guy that the Crucified had to be given the same sound mix as they were getting. It's very interesting to hear the Crucified with the same sound mix as Pantera. I could probably get down on that. Probably would just watch the Crucified and then leave. I think, as I stated on the Crucified episode, but that's pretty interesting. And yeah, it does seem like they have played some shows with Pantera. To answer Doug's question a week later when he's not here to hear it.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. Was it the which Pantera was it?
Yeah, because I mean, Crucified goes back.
Yeah, I know. So are we talking Dude Bro Pantera or Hair Metal Pantera?
It'd have to be Dude Bro Pantera because Hair Pantera stopped in, 88, 89? And Crucified was basically touring on their self-titled release.
Yeah, I mean, Phil did Power Metal with Glamterra.
Which is an amazing album.
But from there on out, hey, it's Phil's best vocals. That's interesting. I would have never really thought of putting those two bands together on a bill, but it kind of makes sense if you really think about it.
So we got a Facebook message from Pekka Olia. Great in-depth discussion about bands that were a major part of my youth. I love how I get inspired to listen to my favorite old metalcore albums with the same excitement that I had in the mid-2000s. Thank you guys for that. P.S. Review some Finnish metal band discographies. Best regards, Finnish Metalhead.
Well, thank you, Finnish Metalhead.
I think Geoff can help us with that.
Yep, I really, really, really want to do a Ghost Brigade episode. I've been pushing for that for over a year now. Maybe I can finally get these dumb fucks to actually listen to me for a change.
Well, we'll definitely give it a shot, but I think after tonight's episode, I might not be that interested in hearing your opinion.
Well, if anybody wanted to hear the sound of excitement, so Dan, tell me about Thursday.
Okay, so Thursday is a band. I'm going to call them Screamo, even though I know they're not really Screamo. They're a Screamo band that started in 1997. They're from New Brunswick, New Jersey. And they are literally one of the most influential bands in this style. Their album, Full Collapse from 2001, is like the blueprint for this type of music. And this type of music would be like emotional singing, very interesting melodic guitar work with a little bit of breakdowns and like some actual screaming over it. And it's delivered in such a melodic and fun, polished and emotional package. It can't be denied.
I agree with everything you said except for the polished aspect when it comes to his vocals. His vocals are brutal, dude, and not in a good way. They're really, really, really bad. Musically, man, they're fantastic. But I swear to God, he sings through his nose the whole damn time. It just drives me insane. But that's my personal opinion. But outside of that, yeah, I love the music. I just wish I could mute his clean singing. It's terrible in the early going.
I don't think there's an instrumental version of any of these albums to be bought.
Well,
wow.
Well, Joe, why don't you edit out Geoff's singing and you sing over the top of it? It'll sound better, guaranteed.
You trying to say I'm a bad singer, Geoff?
Oh, I'm saying you're a better singer than the other Geoff.
So better, meaning not that great?
I'm saying the Geoff is not that great.
Dan, I think I'm going to have to find the mute button. This might have been the plan all along. Are we talking about waiting, or are we going straight into Full Collapse?
Well, I just can't understand. Like, do you not like bands like At the Drive-In, Geoff?
Yeah, I mean, I understand.
Or Glassjaw?
I do, but the.
So I guess what I'm having trouble figuring out is like how this is different than that. Like his voice.
The uniqueness of this individual's voice is not my cup of tea. I understand with this style of music, having a frontman with a very unique sound and a unique tone is important. This guy's uniqueness is just not my bag at all. But I really like the music. And I think that's, as once he starts to sing better, really enjoy this, what they have to offer. But it takes a long time for me to get to that point.
Well, let's take a long time to get to that point then. Okay. We're going to start with their debut album, which is called Waiting. And this one was purchased after I had really gotten into Full Collapse, and there really wasn't a whole lot more Thursday for me to check out that year. So I picked up Waiting, and I'm glad that I did because it's become kind of scarce lately. It's kind of harder to find. And I'd love to have a vinyl version of it, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Apologies to the listener. What you're hearing probably came off of YouTube.
Yeah, more than likely. I mean, you can't really stream this anymore. They had it on Spotify for a while, but then they took it down. It was some kind of re-release. But I love Waiting. Waiting is one of my favorite Thursday albums. In my opinion, the first 3 songs are worth the price of admission. Porcelain, This Side of Brightness, and Ian Curtis are some of the best songs in this style that I've ever heard. I really love Porcelain because Porcelain is the most emotional Thursday song, in my opinion. Like, I really enjoy hearing the emotion in his voice. And yes, his voice cracks. It's a little tone deaf sounding. That's actually what I like about it. I like the rawness of it. And I think it's emotionally more impactful because it's not sang perfectly.
I get it. I understand. I just don't like his voice.
When you say not sang perfectly, it sounds like you're making an excuse for an otherwise lack of musical talent.
No, I don't think there is a lack of musical talent. I've heard Geoff sing much better than this. But on this song in particular, I'm saying that because the vocal delivery is less polished, it does come across as more emotional. I don't have to make an excuse for Thursday.
So you like does it give you like the feel of vulnerability in his voice or something like that?
Yes.
Is that?
I mean, he almost sounds like he's crying on Porcelain.
Right.
And, with the song being about suicide, it really hits home. And one of the things I like about Thursday, too, is the screams. Even whenever I was younger, I really enjoyed the screaming because the screaming sounded emotional, too. It wasn't just trying to sound hardcore. It was very well done. It sounds like somebody's just like grasping on like they're trying to keep their composure, but they just can't. And so the backup screams, I think, really, really sell it to me.
Yeah, I think the screams are very well done. I agree with that. And I like the fact that there's additional stringed instruments on a lot of their tracks as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, This Side of Brightness has that, and that's a fantastic song. It comes right in after Porcelain and kind of cheers things up a little bit, whereas Porcelain was kind of a really dark song. And then you've got it sandwiched between Porcelain and Ian Curtis, and Ian Curtis is also a very emotional song. And this record is very dark. It's probably the most emotionally dark Thursday record. It's not as hopeful as some of the other releases are. And it really puts the emo in the emo, so to speak. Everything's just kind of downtrodden, even down to the cover of the album, which is just like a car or a truck parked in a snowy street, and it's black and white. So it's all grayscale. Everything looks super dark. Contrast between dark and light. And I think that's kind of what this album sounds like. It definitely, just from the cover alone, creates a huge mood that's hard to shake, even after you've listened to the album a couple of times.
There are several points throughout the discography, and especially on the first few releases, where my only comparison is to Billy Corgan in the original lineup of Smashing Pumpkins, where it's almost so soft-spoken that it becomes annoying. And I am not saying Smashing Pumpkins is a bad band. I just don't get it.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up Billy Corgan, because that was stylistically, that was a correlation that I was making with kind of like the nasally sound of his voice. And, you know, I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here because there's a lot of Pumpkin stuff that I really love.
You definitely sound like a hypocrite.
No, I understand that. But as time has gone on, I have discovered I really don't care for Billy Corgan's voice. I have always been able, since I grew up with Smashing Pumpkins, I was always able to look past his lackluster vocals because the music was so good. I think it's what it has always come down to.
So you mean to tell me you think Billy Corgan has lackluster vocals?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, do you like stuff like Our Lady Peace or?
I'm not a big fan of his voice either.
Okay, so this is starting.
You're seeing the pattern.
To become a little bit more clear to me.
Yeah, you see the pattern. There's a particular vocal styling that's just not my cup of tea, and Geoff does fit into that style I'm not a big fan of in general.
Well, let me get a little personal here.
Okay.
I was never a good singer either. I was in choir once and was told by the choir teacher that I had no chance of ever being a good singer. I was never going to be good. You know, she was just calling a spade, you know. But I would always, like, my singing voice has always struggled with being on key. And so when I got into punk rock and emo as a teenager, what attracted me to it was stuff like Our Lady Peace or Thursday and Glassjaw and bands like that, because they all weren't what you would describe as great singers in the traditional sense. And I really latched onto them because they were like me. Because I could sing too in a not traditional sense. And to find this entire genre of music where that was okay and it was part of the emotion of it, you know, and eventually I actually abandoned that and just went straight for screaming because it turns out that I had much better penchant for that. But in those early days, I tried doing a lot of different things. And so a lot of my early demos and stuff that you listen to don't sound all that different from Geoff Rickly. You know, so I think I've got kind of a personal stake in it, where I'm like, no, it's like anything. Eventually you listen to enough of it and you start to like it, whether it's garbage. I mean, it's the only reason why people listen to grindcore. Like, it really is. But like for me, that non-traditional singing, you know, came across as more real and more emotional, and kind of had this feeling of like I could do it too. And I think that's what my main attraction to Thursday was, and still continues to be. So I think that's why I'm so defensive about it, because it definitely filled a void for me when I was younger that I needed, like, in my musical development.
It's gratifying. It almost gives you permission to do what you can, as opposed to what everybody thinks is good.
Correct. And in the case of Thursday, it worked. They were massively popular. And, you know, the other bands I mentioned too, like At the Drive-In and Glassjaw, like Our Lady Peace, like those bands are all really, really popular. It worked. To get off of Waiting for a minute, we'll go into Full Collapse from 2001. This record is not only great, but is a hell of a lot more upbeat than Waiting was. Waiting was a very slow, depressing sort of record. And Full Collapse just comes right out of the gate with Understanding in a Car Crash, which was one of the first Thursday songs I ever heard. I'll talk about the music, actually, get off the vocals for a second. That song is one of the most musically complex, like, punk rock type songs I've heard. It is very melodic. And I can't shake how that song makes me feel. But like everything's just in the pocket. The musicianship is on such a higher level than it was on Waiting, that it's hard not to turn your head and take notice. The screams are louder. The vocals are louder. Everything is It's perfect. You took that band that recorded this depressing album called Waiting, and you gave them a budget, and you threw them out there, and you get Full Collapse, which has some of the greatest Thursday songs ever recorded on it.
Yeah, well, it definitely has some of the most popular. The greatest is yet to come, in my opinion.
I was a little angry listening to this one. I started to get a Hopes Fall vibe. And then the false Billy Corgan vocals kind of overtook it. Maybe it's a true irrational hatred to this style that when I think about emo in the early to mid 2000s and how much I absolutely could not stand it, this is what I remember hating. And I don't remember why it was so bad, but I think it had to do with the fact that people that had arguably less talent played it louder and called it metalcore. Metalcore in the non-Killswitch Engage sense.
Similarities to early 2000s metalcore are kind of valid. I think a lot of these bands played emo, really. And some of them screamed more than other ones, and some of those bands got lumped in and called metalcore bands, and the ones that sang more were considered screamo bands. Even though none of those terms are technically correct, when somebody says metalcore, I'm like, it doesn't really sound like Converge, does it?
Isn't this more like post-hardcore kind of?
That is the genre tag that is put on bands like Thursday, is post-hardcore.
Right.
Even though I couldn't even begin to tell you what that's supposed to mean. Like, hardcore's no longer a style, or these bands used to be hardcore, but now they're not hardcore. But Thursday's just kind of always sounded like Thursday, right?
Yeah, it's not like they were like AFI, who was like a
raw hardcore type band that went, in a much more mainstream direction.
Yeah, that could definitely be called post-hardcore.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Post-hardcore, aka pop music.
One of the things that I liked about Thursday was lyrically. A lot of people claim to hate emo bands or bands that sound like this because it's just a song about how his girlfriend left him. There's like not a single Thursday song that's about that. Their songs are about a variety of topics and like very real stuff, like actual stuff about depression and suicide. And as they go on, more social awareness. Like the Autobiography of a Nation is like, hey, just wanted to let you guys know that we live on American soil, but we didn't live here first. And I'm not going to go any further than that. That's just what the band wrote about. But it's just, I'm using it as an example of the type of topics that they would cover as a band versus like, oh, she left me and I hate her and I'm going to bury her in my backyard, which is what a lot of bands that sounded like Thursday did. But it's interesting that Thursday, being as innovative as they were to that style, really never went into those lyrical tropes. I would say standout songs on Full Collapse. You've got Understanding in a Car Crash for sure. You've got Cross Out the Eyes is awesome. Autobiography of a Nation is awesome. Paris in Flames. And my personal favorite, I Am the Killer. As he repeats over and over in the song, I am no killer, I am no killer. And at the very end of the song, he's like, I am the killer. Which I thought was really fun.
Maybe it's just the fact that I've been watching the Ted Bundy tapes recently. But when you talk about that song, I'm thinking, wasn't that the entire story they told? No, it wasn't me. Okay, it was me.
A lot of the times after serial killers get caught, they just start like telling the stories like in graphic detail. Because they're like, all right, well, I'm still going to be famous. I'm just going to be a famous monster.
Once they're caught, now they get to live out their other dream, which is explain in great detail all their accomplishments.
It's kind of like, a guy gets a podcast and he's like, check out this band that has bad singing and it's really good. I don't care what you guys say. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
And Geoff talked about Ganglia on that episode.
I love this band, and I think Full Collapse is absolutely essential if you're into this type of music. If you haven't heard it yet, you need to hear it.
Would you consider it the pinnacle for them?
I think it is. Well, maybe their next record might be the pinnacle. which we can jump into because I feel like I'm the only one talking here.
2003, War All the Time.
War All the Time was the first time I saw Thursday on TV for their song Signals Over the Air. And it's the song where he's all like, and they put your sex there so they can put the sex on the radio. And this is basically just like Full Collapse, in my opinion. It's Full Collapse Part 2, but with slightly better songwriting.
That's a plus, though. If you're a fan of this, it's more of that.
It's almost like they had to tour on Full Collapse long enough to be relevant and people to be aware of them enough for them to be anticipating another release by Thursday. And so I think that they had a lot of hype going into them when this album was released, even though musically I don't think it's really that different than the last album.
Yeah,
but I do have to say that Geoff's singing is much better on this record.
Yeah, it does. We're getting to the point where it's starting to improve. This is, as far as the early releases, this is easily my preferred listen of the early releases. Did you guys know this is a top 10 album? I mean, I realized that they were popular. I did not realize that they reached number 7 on the charts here in the States.
Oh yeah.
Like holy shit. Like, yeah, just was not expecting that.
What year did mainstream emo take off as pop music?
About 2002, 2003.
My Chemical Romance, The Used, that's probably whenever they were starting to hit it big. That's when it was hitting mainstream.
Thursday.
Well, I think those two are quite a bit bigger than Thursday. I think Thursday...
Did My Chemical Romance have a top 10 album?
Oh, I'm pretty sure they did.
Okay, I'm asking. I don't know. I don't listen to that band.
No, but I guess what I was just trying to say is I think Thursday kind of paved the way. Those other bands came in after the fact.
I think part of the reason why Geoff's singing is so much better on this record than it was on the last two, I think it's producers. I think this was a huge budget release, and I think a producer probably sat down and was like, well, guys, it's great that you made it this far, but we're going to need to start really stepping it up. And I think that's where we get songs that are slightly better. I say excuse me better, but it's like 30% better than what it was on the first two releases. Like I said, I love Geoff's vocal delivery on the early releases and on this album. I think that as we go further in the discography, his voice gets kind of boring and a little bit too normal.
And it's a little less of that style, and that's why I start to like it more and you like it less. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Going back to My Chemical Romance, they had one that was number 2 and sold 3 million copies, The Black Parade. So yeah, they did quite well for themselves.
That didn't happen until much later, though.
It was 3 years later.
So we're still paving the way in 2003.
Right, 2006 is when My Chemical Romance was just totally burst out on the scene. They also got lots of teenage girls to buy their shit too.
Yeah, and I don't think that was Thursday. I think this is still mostly teenage dudes.
Yep, it totally was. I had plenty of friends that are big Thursday fans, including you.
Well, and
I know I'm in the minority, and I just think it's really interesting that it's the two people that are definitely in the minority are in the majority on the podcast.
And I think it's funny that no one has ever blamed Blink-182 directly for the uptick in emo right around 2003, 2004.
I'm not sure how that correlates, though, because I wouldn't consider Blink-182 to be even like a stone's throw away from emo.
Specifically, it's the way Tom sang, because he did that for years. And then 2003, they released their self-titled album, which was mixed by 7 or 8 separate producers because they were just trying to create something different. And then he goes off and does Angels and Airwaves, and everybody's used to that whining singing in the pop culture. So what was the next logical thing? I don't think anybody really knew what they were focusing on when we started to pay attention to real emo bands.
See, real emo was a decade before, in my opinion, but I'm an old school guy.
To me, real emo is basically hardcore, you know. or there's two lines of thought on that. There's the Geoff preference, which is kind of your more lower key, almost alternative rock influenced emo bands.
Yeah,
and then there's mine, which goes off into like the screamo hardcore direction. They're both accurate for the term.
Right, it's just two different ends of the spectrum of what it is, but you're right. Yeah, my style of emo actually has, more of a, like you said, it's more understated, and if anything it has, that would be somewhat of a, if you're going to tie it into metal, it's going to be like it has some shoegazing elements into it.
Absolutely. But I think Thursday has that. I think it's just delivered in a tighter package. This has got a lot more of the melodic elements in it than what you're used to with a hardcore band, so you can't really call them a hardcore band, even though they've got the screaming and stuff. But they're also not like a Sunny Day Real Estate, where it's a little bit more downtrodden, a little bit more slower, for lack of a better term. So what they did is they packaged it up, and then a lot of bands picked it up and went, I hear a little bit of the Hopes Fall sound in here. I hear a little bit of, the melodic hardcore sound in here. But it's delivered in such a slick package, and that's what I'm talking about with it being really polished sounding. Once you get to War All the Time, everything Thursday does sounds very polished, which is kind of weird because I've always felt that the band had a very punk rock aesthetic to them. But for whatever reason, their recorded albums are very polished from 2003 on.
Well, yeah, I think part of that too, musically, I think they've always been polished. What's changed is the polish in Geoff's voice.
Right.
As it progresses. And I think that's where you get that detachment. And I think that's what makes, for a lot of people, the appeal on their earlier stuff and what makes it so striking is the fact that, is you have these imperfect vocals over perfect music. So it's not necessarily perfect music, but it's very well executed. And then you have vocals that are purposely imperfect, and I think that's what a lot of people like about it.
That's the appeal to melodic hardcore music, right? Is that like a lot of people, they just would scream, and that would create the imperfect vocal that you're talking about. And in this case, though, it is the singing itself, the clean singing, which I thought was actually kind of unusual.
Yeah, because the screams are spot on.
Yeah, I guess it was about 3 years later they put out a fourth album called A City by the Light Divided.
2006.
I still like this record. I think it's really good. I think it sounds like Thursday. However, it is even more polished than what we'd had before. And they started losing me a little bit here because their music started just sounding like melodic rock music. There was another band that was popular at the time called Sparta. And that's what this record kind of reminds me of.
I like Sparta.
I like Sparta as well. As a matter of fact, the lead singer of Sparta used to be the backup vocalist for At the Drive-In, or I guess now is in At the Drive-In again. And I actually enjoy his vocals more than the lead singer of At the Drive-In, Cedric Bixler, because his voice isn't quite as over the top. And there's a lot of comparisons I see between the singer from Sparta and the singer of Thursday. Really? Whereas the singer of Sparta has a little bit better of a range, he's a little bit less tone deaf, for lack of a better term.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's the tonality for me that, because I'd like Sparta considerably more than I like Thursday.
The Billy Corgan is in full effect on this one.
Oh, I don't think so. I think he sounds way better on this. And I'm saying that from like a music critic standpoint, it sounds better. I personally prefer it to sound like it used to sound.
Yeah, I get it. There's some people that you give them the choice that, hey, I want to listen to Gish. That's going to be like their go-to for Smashing Pumpkins, because that's where it all started for the most part. So, yeah, I get it. You're looking for that style, and you're losing that style now.
Yeah, and it's weird because I don't think that they're really following trends here. I think this is the last Thursday album that I would actually say it's the previous album, War All the Time, was the last one that was innovative for the style of music that they got popular on. I think this is their first step away from that. And it's kind of a miss for me. I think it's still pretty good because it still sounds like Thursday. It's still basically the same thing, but it's they've definitely toned everything back a little bit. The songs aren't as fast and crazy. There's not as many like straightforward songs, and it's a lot of just like slower paced emotional stuff. And I mean, I like that, but I'm not really always in the mood for it. Like, I can put Full Collapse on any day and enjoy myself, whereas this record, I have to kind of be in the mood for it. So their next one didn't come for another 3 years. They're kind of a 3 years band. I mean, Full Collapse and War All the Time came out pretty close to one another, but it seems like after War All the Time, they kind of just toured forever, and then it took like 3 years to get a record out. So their next one in 2009, Common Existence, starts off really strong, but kind of devolves into that more alternative rock, emo stuff that Geoff likes.
Yeah, and we're starting to get closer and closer to, my jam.
I almost got a Mars Volta vibe off of this one. And I'm wondering, was this the year that emo actually decided to change again? Because you couldn't just tie everything up in the It's Under Oath or It's Thursday at the Drive-In. Bands that had not been known for being as creative or non-standard songwriters were getting credit for it, whereas a band like Thursday had been doing it this whole time and just nobody noticed.
I don't think what Thursday was doing on this record in 2009 is really representative of what emo will be. I think they were in that scene for a long time, and I think they paved the way for other bands that sounded like Thursday to come to the forefront. But I think here they kind of just focus on like noise. There's like some noisier songs on here, like musically. It's not as polished and melodic like the other stuff was, but it's more of like they have like noisy parts and stuff. And it all just seems very like they wrote it on the road, and it sounded kind of like their old stuff, but not really. And it's really hard to categorize this because 2 records after War All the Time, it sounds like the same singer, but it doesn't really sound like the same band. And I don't know if it's like lineup changes or what, but it just doesn't really strike the same way that it did back then. The songs don't have the same type of immediacy to them. I mean, maybe I just outgrew the band. I don't know.
From what I can see, they have a consistent lineup from 2003 onward.
So they just collectively wanted to change. And change they did because...
yeah, I guess the other thing, too, on Common Existence, Tim McElrath does guest vocals. That's somebody whose voice I really do like.
Who I think actually has a very similar singing style to Geoff Rickley.
Yeah, there's just something that cuts through. Less nasal, more front of the mouth kind of sound to it.
I don't know. For me, they sound pretty similar. Like, it's almost like Owl City versus Reliant K, if you can make that connection.
Wow.
You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
First time those have been brought up.
Yeah, I know on this podcast. What is going on?
I like Reliant K more.
Yeah, I do too.
I like Andrew WK more than that.
Well,
you do.
So in 2011, they put out an album called No Devolution. No Devolution. I
this
never
actually might be the right time to say No Devolution.
That would be correct.
There you go.
Joe got it right. No Devolution.
Vocal major, motherfucker.
Similar to Waiting, this is kind of a dark record. It's slow. The singing is
Billy Corgan.
No, I don't think so.
No, this is the
I don't hear the
best.
Billy Corgan thing. I don't get that.
I did on some of the other stuff, but no, this is by far Geoff's highest quality vocals is on this album, in my opinion, and I don't think it's even close. I think it was a breakthrough for him. But yes, it is more of a mainstream sound with his vocals. There's no question about that. But I'm fine with that. This album was very, very relaxing for me, and it's easily my favorite album. but it is more of the shoegazing, downtrodden kind of feel to it that I like. I like that downtrodden, kind of vibe to music. And this, I kind of like this departure personally. And it's, I haven't said it in a long time, but this is a lot more atmospheric. And I think that's one of the big reasons why I dug it.
You are now entering Jeffrey's atmosphere.
Well,
yeah, now the question is which Jeff's?
I think this is certainly atmospheric, considering how, emotionally impacting their older stuff was for me. This just sounds like boring crap to me. Yeah, his voice sounds better, whatever. There's a million bands out there that have a quote-unquote great singer. This just doesn't sound enough like Thursday to me for it to even count. Because me, my measuring stick is War all the time. So if it doesn't sound like that, you kind of lost me. And they definitely lost me on this record.
I feel like they were trying to do something else. I brought up the Mars Volta before. Are they trying to create a soundscape and just not succeeding?
Oh, they totally succeeded. Outside of Dan's critical opinion, this was a critic's darling of an album. I mean, people praise this thing pretty much universally. I don't know. I mean, I think Dan's stuck in the past. He's looking for a particular style, and they're not producing that anymore, which is cool. That's why we have the old albums,
They're still there.
Yep, they're still there.
I mean, I'll still always tell people that Thursday is one of my favorite bands of all time. Regardless of how I feel about the new release.
Will you do the same thing for In Flames?
No, there was just too much betrayal there.
Just curious, because I know we both of us worship at the altar of early In Flames, so I was just kind of curious on that. I really like this album. This was the only one out of the discography that was a hands down buy. I really, 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 really like this album a lot. I mean, a whole lot. I listened to this one probably 10 times this week. And I'm not kidding. I really enjoyed it. It was such an easy listen for me. It just struck a chord, which was frustrating for me because, I know how much Dan loves Thursday, and I wanted to like it too. And I just, until we got to this point, it was, okay, it's pretty good. I just don't care for the vocals or it's all right. But like Dan said, it sounds like a lot of other stuff. This one just, man, it was just like the perfect storm for me. I really, really enjoyed myself. But it's also more of atmospheric, alt rock kind of thing, which is definitely different than what they've done in the past.
So this is your gateway into the band. Now you have to work your way backwards.
Well, I mean, I have been trying to. It didn't. I like this newer style than I did the older stuff. That's all. I mean, I'm just the opposite of what Dan is. Dan, the only difference is there's a lot more of what Dan likes than what I like that Thursday has put out. So I really only have one album to listen to. Dan's got 3, maybe 4 that he can comfortably listen to.
After no de-evolution, that was it. They're gone. They have reunited recently to do some shows, but it pretty much never turned into anything. They've been touring around playing Full Collapse in its entirety, which I would definitely go to see. And
that's got to be a dream for a fan.
They're not really putting out new music.
Is he still with that Lost Prophets spinoff?
I don't know. I meant to research that a little bit this week, but I didn't. It would be interesting to hear him sing the Lost Prophet songs, though.
Oh, does he? I thought they were just. I just thought it was just like the dudes from Lost Prophets said they're leaving that shit in the past, and then they just move forward with Geoff.
Maybe they did. I don't know a whole lot of it, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay. I don't either. I didn't know if you did or not, since I know you're a fan of his.
Out of respect for Dan, I'm going to give him the last thought and say, Geoff, final thoughts on Thursday.
This is a prime example of me trying really hard and wanting to like a band, and either they come up short or I've come up short, or a combination thereof. But then they kind of pull it out at the end. The No Divisive is definitely the cream of the crop for me, and I was not expecting that because I was not a huge fan of a lot of the other stuff that I was listening to before, mainly because of the vocals. We've made it pretty clear on this episode that just not my style of vocals. I know they're touring. I really do wish that they would put out some new music, because kind of leaving off 8 years ago with No D'Evolution. See, now Dan has me doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious. I wanted to see what was going to come next, and I don't get to. I'm kind of bummed about that.
Much like classic Smashing Pumpkins, I believe there is an audience for what the majority of people would consider to be melancholy bullshit. I don't think Thursday is bullshit. It's just not for me. I don't think Smashing Pumpkins is a terrible band back in the 90s. But for the most part, it's just melancholy. And it's not for me. I know that was their whole thing too, melancholy, infinite sadness. I think for somebody that's looking for the not normal, but not necessarily the aggressive or the extreme, Thursday might be your band. On the grand scale of, I want to do the opposite of what people consider to be normal or good, one person might pick up grindcore. And I don't even mean the good grindcore. I mean the drum machine in the corner of the room with the bass guitar that is being stepped on by the guy just gurgling. The really bad stuff. Somebody else might pick up Thursday. It's not normal. It's not pop. It doesn't work for me, but it definitely works for somebody. And if it's for you, listen to it. Dan, what about you?
Well, I think Thursday is an incredibly innovative band. It got me into this style of music. It got a lot of people into this style of music. Personally, the band means a lot to me. I'll always enjoy their first 4 records like they are just solid gold. Obviously it's not for everybody, but for me, I think you can't go wrong with Thursday. And if you like singers that put their heart out on their sleeve for everyone to see, I think you're going to find a lot to like here.
What's your album of the week?
My album of the week is All Else Failed by Zao, the very first Zao album. I've been listening to that a lot. I got a vinyl copy of it a while back whenever it was re-released, and it is awesome.
Jeff, nice. What about you?
Until Fear No Longer Defines Us by Ghost Brigade. That first song on there, Into the Woods. Oh shit, man! Talk about a hook right off the get-go. Fucking love that song, and it's a little bit slower too, and a lot of acoustic elements to it, and I fucking love it.
Black Sabbath, Master of Reality.
Old school.
Because even when Dan insists I listen to Thursday, I can always listen to Black Sabbath when I'm done.
Wow, you really showed me.
You don't gotta be bitter about
snarky.
It. I'm the only one that's allowed to trash on people's favorite bands. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Discography Discussion. There's a lot of ways you could reach out to us and talk to us. We are all over your internet right now. We're on Facebook under Discography Discussion. We are on Twitter at discussmetal. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You could send us pretty much anything you want in there. We love getting band recommendations from you guys. Sometimes it can be hard for me to decide what bands to talk about every week, so those listener suggestions really help us out. So drop us a line, give us a like on Facebook, send us a tweet, anything you want to do, and pretty soon we might even actually have a voicemail set up for you guys to leave messages on, which will be a lot of fun. We'll give you more information about that as we have it.
And on that note, this has been episode 108 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me money.
Not everything seems clear, the future's not so bright. The only chance is not to waste your life. Have hope and have no fear, the truth walks by your side.